As you know, we're launching a new platform to be more interactive and hopefully provide you all with a better experience. So there are a few little things that are new about the format, including the fact that you can add your chat comments. We're going to be having some polls that we'll release as needed, and we'll also be having some handouts that are connected directly to the webinar. So that should be cool. And I think we can go ahead and get started. We've got 26 or so on the call. Shauna now should be a panelist. Is that right, Shauna? Are you here? She'll pipe up in a second, I'm sure. I am sure. And so let's go ahead and talk about the agenda a little bit. We've got some calendar announcements, and analyst Teresa is going to give you all an update. And then Shauna will be giving an update from the collaborations desk. And then we have a guest presentation by Rebecca Klein, our partner from the OUNCE, talking about essential frameworks so programs can make improvements. We'll end toward the end there, as usual, with some equity resources for programs, and then we'll have a little huddle with OPK onlys as needed. Okay, so Shauna says she's going to call back in, which is fine. So if you have questions or comments, feel free to add them to the chat box, and people will respond to them as best we can. And without further ado, let's hear it from Teresa.
Good morning, everyone. Mine is quick and simple, and those words mean the same thing, but in any event, just a reminder, I have some of your monthly reports, but not everyone's, and they are due March 15th. So if you have any questions about them before you get them in, let me know. Also, if you turn them in and find that there is something you want to change, all you have to do is get in touch with me, and I can send you a link to the things you want to change, and you can fix it really quickly. In addition, this quarter, it is time for the budget workbook item expenditures year 2, quarter 2, which is also due March 15th. And that, if it's easier for you, there is a place to upload your files in the monthly report so that you can submit everything all at once. But if not, send it to me via email so that I can track the receipt of those and we can do our reviews. And then I guess the only other thing is, if anyone's having any questions now that we've used Smartsheets for a while, I would love to hear your input on how you feel about that process for monthly reporting. So that's it from me today.
Other questions real quickly right now about Smartsheets? That, well, we've got Teresa with her Smartsheet hat on. You can post them in the chat or raise your hand and I can unmute you. Either way. I'll practice my wait time. I see Rebecca has got the green screen behind her with the classic Chicago skyline. It was very effective. Yeah, very cool. All right, well, I don't see any questions or hands raised. So next we'll turn to Shauna and the Head Start Collaboration Office updates. Shauna, are you here?
I am here. Thank you, Michael. Everyone can hear me, right?
I think so.
Excellent. So good morning, everyone. I'm only here for a period. I think we've talked about the fact that there's another meeting that coincides with this, so I try to juggle and do both. So I will be here for at least the first little bit before I have to run across the hall. So the big things I wanted to touch base on is, as some of you may know, I was in DC last week for a meeting with the Head Start collaboration directors from across the country, as well as the training and technical assistance staff, some of our federal staff, both from DC and from the regions, to have meetings on various topics. So I wanted to kind of let you guys know some of the highlights from that meeting. I also wanted to offer you guys some resources on data that was being shared by the National Center on Program Management and Fiscal Operations, just so you guys can get an idea of some very nice tools that are available to you to utilize in regards to connecting with data and how data is used in your programs. And the last thing we're going to talk about is the needs assessment, and letting you guys know that the plan is to send that out to all of you via SurveyMonkey tomorrow, March 10th, and that the plan would be to have that back by the end of the month, so you have a little bit of time to collect it and make sure you get the information needed. So I'll be sending that out tomorrow to all of you. All right, so next, thank you. So one of the big conversations while we were in DC was kind of touching on the federal landscape right now and where things are at with the Office of Head Start within their position in the Administration for Children and Families in the Department of Health and Human Services. And just to, a lot of things people already know, most of this is all just public knowledge, but as you know, there has been a federal hiring freeze, and that does have some effect on the availability of staff to support various aspects of the Head Start program. At this point in time, a lot of regions are doing okay because they were able to fill positions before that hiring freeze came into place. But as we move forward, that's going to be a consideration on the availability of resources and challenges that may arise around that. One thing that we discussed was the under-enrollment across the country, and this was a really important piece of information, I think, for a lot of us, because again, we know there's been challenges in different pockets, but it's very intriguing to know that it's actually something that is a trend right now across the nation, and that looking back 5 or 10 years, under-enrollment was at like 0.6%. So it really wasn't a challenge that our programs are facing, because we had long wait lists and lots of children eligible and filling slots wasn't that much of a challenge. But currently across the country, it's creeping up to being closer to 6 or 7% of under-enrollment across the country of vacant slots. So because of that, this is a really big focus. That's also something with the administration changes that puts us at risk if we're not utilizing the funds to the full extent that we've been awarded them for. And one of the things that was discussed is that there is an ability for them to move funds to areas where there's greater need. And so there is conversations about the possibility of doing that with Head Start funds if there are programs that aren't able to meet their enrollment and meet that need, to be able to move those slots to places in the countries where there is greater need and there are more children on wait lists and needing services. So it's kind of a newer conversation that has begun, but that is a conversation that's kind of starting. That's good for everyone to be aware of, that there is a challenge with filling slots, and that one of the options on the table is to be able to move those funds to where there is a greater need to be able to support children and families who are on wait lists and needing services, so that Head Start as a whole is fully meeting its objectives and goals to be serving children and families in this country. The other thing that we talked about was the early Head Start child care partnerships, and a lot of you that were in Seattle recently got to hear directly from Fran talking about those applications. And so you are probably well aware that there was a great response. They got a lot more applications than expected, and consequently it's a very small percentage that they're actually able to be working with and be able to award for those grants to be able to offer those services. And so there is they did state that everyone who had applied would receive notification in writing of their status. So you will, if you did put in one of those applications, you will be finding out officially your status for that. And they also plan to send out the panel review comments so people can have those comments to have a better understanding of what their strengths were and what some of the potential challenges were with those applications. Because there were so very many of them, they were very clear that you should expect a lot of strengths. And so if you get back a response letting you know that you were not selected in this round, it might be very confusing because you have glowing comments that are in the feedback you're receiving. And the reason behind that is it was just at such a high level for the people who were actually selected that you had a strong application, but there just wasn't enough funds to meet the level of strong applications that were given. So we want to make sure that programs are aware of that they will be notified, and you will hear lots of good things, and because of how tough the competition was is the reason why there wasn't more high-level applications that were selected to actually implement services. They also talked about the DRS, Designation Renewal System, and the new cohort should be coming out within the next month. And as well with that, they should have the class scores available for individuals that are curious where the class scores are at with the 10%, the lower 10%. And this should be available within the next month, they said, and it would be forecast on grants.gov, and the actual funding opportunity announcement, or FOA, will come out in the fall, so that we can be aware kind of those timelines, because they're kind of falling in a step with how those are coming out and how those are being done and awarded. So that was pretty much a gist of what we covered in DC. We'll be talking a little bit more about the federal landscape when we talk about continuing resolution, which is just a little later in the conversation for us. So with the data session that I was able to attend, and these new tool worksheets called data directions that have been put together by Child Trends, OPRE, which is the Office of Planning, Research, and Evaluation, as well as ASPE, which is the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Planning and Evaluation. These are really great tools, and if you wouldn't mind, Michael, clicking on the first link there, all of these are hot links that actually go to the web pages where you can actually find these resources to be able to review them. So if we click on one of those.
You want me to click on that? Is that what you said, Shauna? Or just?
Yes. Yes, please.
Yep, go ahead. Okay, here we go. Very exciting. See what happens.
Very exciting. And so it links into each of those, so you guys can actually find and review these on these different topics. And so they kind of go into, they're a little lengthy, but they do a nice job of diving into understanding what the data governance system is. And with Head Start, like the conversation we talked about, is we're so used to our governance being related to like our policy councils and our boards that it's kind of confusing to use the term data governance. So where you see data governance, you can just substitute data management. But this is talking about data management and kind of the way that you can create and manage it, and kind of goes through step by step to let you know like what some of the pieces that you need to address that, what the different roles are in doing that, and the ways that you can look at that and build that up in your agency. So I know that as things become more streamlined, more online, more accessible, and there's more and more questions about this, that these might be some useful resources for all of you. So if you go back to the slide with a list of them, it does list, I think there's 5 of them total. And this first one is probably where most of you will begin, with creating and managing governing. It also talks about how to discuss data with families and kind of close that loop and bringing those pieces together. It talks about, can you go back to the last screen, please? And then it talks about, I know there's one that looks at research partners. So the third one is probably one that's a little advanced for where a lot of us are at. But if you're trying to engage external research partners to help use data and the different ways it's captured, that can kind of help you look at that. And then it talks about sharing partnerships with other organizations and kind of what the lines are and the rules are and how to kind of support and guide that process. And then it kind of goes into a bigger piece about the continuum of data to look at academic progress across the continuum from early care to education through elementary school. So these are all hot links when you guys get the slide deck for this, for you guys to go ahead and look at those and see which ones can be a benefit for you. And I'm sure as we go to Chicago for trainings and there's other training opportunities that the National Center will be doing a little bit more work to dive into this and offer us more opportunity around this. So next slide, please. All right, so for the federal budget is the next piece that we kind of wanted to touch base on, that was discussed a little bit when we were in DC. And part of it is even, I don't know, are we able to do voting, Michael? Can people tell me how many people know what a continuing resolution is and understand how they work? Is that a question I can ask and you can get me an answer? Yeah, answer.
Just take me a second here to do that. So just give me a sec.
Ooh, I'll totally give you. That's kind of exciting because I would love to know like how many people are really familiar with the continuing resolution. Because I know that you guys have been doing this work for a long time, so you've been through past continuing resolutions with the federal government. I just don't know if it's one of those terms that people use and nobody's taken the time to actually kind of explain a little bit. So it'll help me to know the level of depth to go into it if I actually have a better feeling of how many of you are familiar with it and understand those pieces.
Okay, almost there. 1 second.
Thank you. This is what happens when Michael and I get to be in very different places for our meetings. We're communicating through the meeting.
Okay, here we go. This is exciting. Our first poll. Very exciting. Here we go. And launch. Look at that. So you should be getting a poll now. It's very highly scientific. People are voting.
That's excellent. Well, it'll definitely save us from me talking on and on if it's something that everyone here knows way more than they want to about it. It'll be useful to get a sense. So with that, so while people are voting, with the continuing resolution, that's what we currently have in place. It's expiring later in April. And at the same time, there's another budget that's going to be put on the table by the President and by Congress because we are looking at the coming fiscal year already. And so it's going to be a little complicated as there's going to be multiple budgets that we're talking about. And one is for the fiscal year we're currently in, and one is for the fiscal year coming up. And so as we hear things from on the news and federally, it's kind of taking both of those things into account at the same time since they're both happening right now. So what did we find out, Michael?
Well, gosh, we have very high participation rates. 96%.
Yay! You guys are awesome. We have great people in our work.
All of you voted. And those who didn't, you know who you are, and so do we. So it seems like people have sort of a medium sense or quite a bit of a sense, and then we have a smaller group that really would like to kind of know what is the basics here.
All right. Well, then we'll focus on the medium level, and then folks, that if you are just a little familiar and you have questions, feel free to connect with me afterwards. I'd be more than happy to kind of go over it in more depth. And I know the association is pretty good about getting information out about this. But essentially, if we go back to the slides, the continuing resolution.
Very exciting. Poll must be closed to enable close the poll. I need to close it. That's so exciting. How do I do that? Teresa knows.
You just push the X on the corner. You did it, I think.
Well, now I went to something else. This is very exciting. Let's try
I closed the poll.
Okay.
Thank you, Teresa.
You're welcome.
Okay, so if Michael figures this out, I'll just start talking. You guys roll with me.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. So essentially what happens with a continuing resolution is that a federal budget has not been finalized before the fiscal year begins. So consequently, what they do is they instead just agree to let things stay as they are essentially. And sometimes there are slight changes. So with the continuing resolution that was passed, it did include some money for stuff around Zika and some very small things. But by and large, it continues things to be status quo. What happens with that, though, is when the continuing resolution is up, so they just continued it until the end of April, essentially. And what happens is when there are changes in April, which those of you who live through sequestration understand this very, very well, that when there are changes, so let's say they decide there is a 2% across the board cut, and they determine this in late April, what happens then is for grantees who received their funds in December, they now have to make up in the last half of their grant year, they have to make up that 2% cut, if there was that, which we don't know what they're going to do. There hasn't been any determinations around that. But it's just helping to have that awareness that even though we have a continuing resolution, it doesn't actually continue the budget at its current state for the entire fiscal year. It continues it to a point where they make a decision about what's going to happen going forward. And so because of that, for grantees who get their funds in August, things will be formally determined and decided by August, and you will know exactly what you're looking at for your fiscal year and for your work and your services. But if there are any shifts to do that for grantees, especially ones that are funded in November, December, January, that can have a harder impact because even though it might be a slight cut of 1% or 0.5%, it almost doubles for you to get that taken care of in this fiscal year. And so that's just something that for everyone to consider with planning, that we all hope for the best. We all hope that things go forward at the same level and things improve if nothing else. But until things are actually finalized at the end of April, if they're finalized, which they should be finalized at the end of April, for us to really know what the landscape is, even for the fiscal year that we're in the middle of. And so just for everyone to be aware, I'm sure the association has more information about this and is sharing more information, and as we get closer and there are budget proposals and better information about what the plan is, people be more aware of that. But I just want to take a minute to make sure that everyone was having the opportunity, because again, we have visited that in DC, and I wanted to make sure that all of you were on the same page about the fact that we don't actually know where the fiscal year is, even though some of us are partially into our year and spending funds at the current levels, because that's what's expected at this point in time. Does anyone have any questions around that? Okay, and I'm pretty sure everyone's on listen-only mode, so you would have to, can they raise their hand, Michael, or they can just type questions? How does that work? Michael, are they able to type their questions, or can they raise their hand and ask one?
They can do both. They can raise their hand, or they can type it in the chat box.
Perfect. Thank you.
Oh.
Wonderful. Well, if anyone has questions after this, especially... What did you say?
I said Donalda has a question, so let me make sure I understand how to... Oh, it says, Donalda, you need to enter your audio pin so you can hear. That's pound 52 pound. Pound 52 pound, so people can hear you. Donalda, that's something you have to do on your end. I can't do that.
We do have a question in the question pane.
Go ahead, Teresa.
It says the 1 to 2% cut. Was that an example or something to be aware of?
That was just, thank you very much. It's very important. That is just an example. And so there's no current cuts proposed. There is the president's budget. There's some talk around for next fiscal year, but for this year there hasn't been specifics proposed, and if there would be any cuts at all, we do not know. So that's something that we don't know, and those were just examples of me giving examples. Thank you for that question. That's a great question.
Donalda, you still have to enter the PIN so you can talk, so I can't do that from my side, unfortunately. Donalda, you should be able to talk now.
Okay, sorry.
Yay!
I kept pushing. Mine has to do with, there was in the continuing resolution, though, the 0.19%. Is there any more discussion about that?
At this point, there wasn't, because there is one budget that was having that piece looked at, and at this point, there isn't more known, and there's the additional question mark that even once we do have cuts, when they're across the board cuts like that, it's hard to say how they come down to our level. And so that's something that they go to, like, Department of Health and Human Services, which then passes it down to ACF, which then passes it to the Office of Head Start, and the Office of Head Start scrambles to see, because I think most of you are aware, with the sequestration, it was supposed to be a bigger hit than it was, but because of the fact that the Office of Head Start was able to pull back on contracts they hadn't put out at a higher level and able to pull out other expenses that they would have had, they were able to use those funds to then help to offset the actual level of cuts to grantees. So even when we have like estimations of across the board cuts, it'll take some time before we know how that will actually translate to services and to the work we're doing. Does that answer your question, Donalda?
I think she might have hung up, unfortunately, but we'll make sure that she gets that answer. I'm sure it's helpful for others.
Well, there we go. Okay, so does anybody else have any questions related? And again, you guys, feel free to email me or call me to have other conversations around that. And you can also talk with your federal staff. Again, we don't necessarily know anything, but it's just really important for grantees to be mindful that we don't officially have our budget for the full year. We only have the budget through the end of April, which is about half of our budget year. And so it's an important thing for us to kind of have in mind and in consideration as we're budgeting and moving forward with planning. So next slide, please. Wonderful. I'm all done.
Yep.
Thank you so much for letting me present, you guys. I will be able to stay on for just a couple more minutes before I have to leave for my other meeting. But definitely reach out to me if you have any questions, and thank you for letting me be part of this.
Wonderful. Well, let me get my little act together here and introduce our next speaker. So we're just thrilled to have Rebecca Klein on the line with us today. The Early Learning Division has been awarded a grant from the Gates Foundation's Ounce of Prevention Fund, well, in collaboration with the Gates Foundation and the Ounce of Prevention Fund, and also the Alliance for Early Success. It's a collaboration to improve instructional interactions in the state of Oregon, and we are delighted to partner with Rebecca. She is a fantastic resource, and we're thrilled that she's going to share with us this presentation around how we can improve our early learning systems, especially around coaching and professional development and the leadership that requires. So I'm sure she can say a little bit more for herself, but I will now go to the slides here and share what she's talking about. Okay, Rebecca?
Yep, sounds good. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. I think that's right. And it should pop up here just about like now.
Perfect. All right. So good morning, everyone. I am Rebecca Klein. I'm a senior program developer at the Ounce of Prevention Fund, a non-for-profit organization in Chicago. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself and the Ounce before we get started. So the Ounce's mission is to ensure that all children have the best chance for success in school and in life by advocating for and providing high-quality early childhood education. We approach that from multiple angles: program, policy, professional development, and research. I myself have many years of experience in teaching and leading in Head Start and Early Head Start programs. In my current work in the Partnership for Pre-K Improvement, I bring expertise in instructional leadership and professional learning and program implementation. And I work alongside my policy colleagues at the Ounce in providing consultation to state leaders, partnering with them to improve the quality of pre-K policies, systems, and programs, as Michael described. So why don't we get started? Is there anything else you wanted to say, Michael? Okay. So today we're going to introduce the essential organizational supports for improvement. My goal is to make this an engaging learning experience for everyone. Today we'll discover why we need transformative thinking and innovative frameworks that support leaders with continuous improvement. We'll start by engaging you in some reflection and sharing about excellent teaching and about the challenges of achieving high-quality interactions and instruction. And we'll do that with the chat box and polling features, so get ready. I'm glad you had a little practice. Then we'll examine some research about the essential organizational supports for improvement, and some research that I think you'll find very compelling. Then towards the second objective, we'll watch a video that will help us define and explore instructional leadership and job-embedded professional learning as critical levers for pre-K improvement. And we'll connect those to the revised Head Start performance standards. And then finally, we'll use the chat box and polling feature to reflect on learning at the end. And we'll be introducing a survey as a post-webinar activity to help you reflect on your own practices and help us gather some information to better support you. So you can go to the next slide. So let's get started with the real heart of our work, effective teaching and learning. So think of a time that you observed a preschool classroom, a specific time recently, when you said to yourself, wow, that is some really excellent teaching. What was it that you saw and heard from the children, the teacher, and the environment that made you think that this is an instance of really excellent teaching and learning? So please use the chat box, post your responses to everyone. Just write 1 or 2 words to describe what you saw. What did you see and hear from the children? What did you see and hear the teacher doing that made it excellent teaching? Anyone?
We actually have some in the question
Okay.
box.
Okay.
People are putting in things like connection between teacher and students, curiosity,
Okay,
wonder, shared laughter, and excitement from children. There's a lot of good comment coming in through the question.
Okay, great. I'm sorry I can't see those. I can see the chat box, so I don't see questions.
So if we could use the chat box is at the bottom, folks. So if you want to put it in the chat box so that everyone can see it, that might make it easier than using the question box for this.
That's great, though. For now, though, Teresa, if something pops up in the question box, will you let me know?
Yep, I'll be monitoring.
All right. So curiosity, excitement, that joyful engagement in that learning and those interactions. Those responses are perfect. So let's hold that ideal in our minds as we think through what it takes for teachers and programs to implement this kind of high-quality teaching consistently. So next slide. What goes into those moments? Much of what you described is represented here in the House framework for effective practice used in Head Start. The engaging interactions and environments are the foundation. And research-based curricula is a critical pillar. It provides the learning goals, the content, the learning experiences, and those that structure and guide the interactions. And then teachers need to use ongoing child assessments, the other pillar, to understand children's progress towards the learning goals so that they can individualize their interactions and instruction at that peak of effective teaching there. Effective practice is also inclusive of strong partnerships with families. This is just really incredibly complex work. It requires intentional planning and a lot of support. So how are most teachers doing with this right now? I'm going to go to the next slide. So here, just looking at the teacher-child interactions, here we have a graph showing the distribution of class pre-K scores for all Head Start programs. This is data from 2015. And the scores are in the 3 domains of emotional support, classroom organization, and instructional support. I understand you're all familiar with the class, so let's do a quick poll. To what extent is this national Head Start data similar to your own program's data? Would you say it's very similar, similar, somewhat similar, not very similar, or don't know? Give you a second to think about that. So you can see the scores indicate that many teachers are providing high-quality emotional support to children. In your descriptions of excellent teaching, you mentioned, those joyful interactions, that warmth, that responsiveness. So it's happening with good consistency nationally. And teachers are providing moderate to high-quality classroom organizational supports. So things like productivity, good transitions, those in hands-on facilitated interactions. That's also happening with good consistency nationally, too. How's the poll going, Michael?
Well, we're waiting for some late returns from the East Coast.
Okay. So
we're well over 60% voted. Lots of similarities, either very similar or similar. Yeah, I'll close
Right.
it.
So we're all in more or less the same boat, I think, nationally, with those high emotional and organizational supports and the low quality instruction. And it's those same teachers. Yeah. So good. Okay. Yeah. Very mostly similar. So it's the same teachers, though, that are providing instructional supports in a low range of quality, and it's actually too low to really have much influence on children's learning. You know, those good conversations, that scaffolding, those how and why questions for concept development, those types of interactions are much less common. And if you go to the next slide, Michael, you see how difficult it's been to improve the quality of instruction. Nationally, on average, the low quality of those instructional supports has remained stagnant year after year. In the latter years, in 2014 and 15, you can see a few programs out there in like the high middle range, but the average is basically, it's exactly the same. It's around 2.8. So again, with those instructional supports at that level, with little concept development and quality feedback and language support, we're not going to have a strong impact on children's readiness for kindergarten. So the question is why? Why aren't we seeing much improvement here? So again, if you could use the chat box, that would be great. And just tell me a little bit about what you think are, on the next slide, Michael, the biggest challenges or obstacles to improving teacher-child interactions and instruction.
So some people are saying they can't see the chat box, which is curioso for me. So they're taking advantage. They're Head Start people, so we use the resources we have.
Yes.
Some comments I'm hearing that staff changes are a big barrier to increasing scores. Staff turnover, Sui points out, very high. Turnover, Jane says turnover. Apparently there's turnover issues.
Yes, turnover issues, and that there are a lot of complex reasons for that, for sure. There's also, really a complex.
If I could just say a couple more comments, since you can't see them, Rebecca. Julie comments that oftentimes the super challenging behaviors from kiddos make it hard to have that sustained positive interactions with kids that are pushing learning. High needs aggressive behavior, pull time away from instructional support, more about turnover.
Yeah.
Maybe as we're, Teresa can help me figure out why people can't see the chat box. That'll be interesting.
All right. So as I said, there is a complex set of issues to address in many different levels, and so I think we're really going to have to think about comprehensive solutions, right? So what are the strategies that you're trying? If you could go to the next slide. What are the strategies you're focusing on now to really improve teaching and learning in your program?
So another question for the group. What strategies are you trying?
Yeah, go ahead and write in the chat box or question. What are you seeing there?
Well, coaching around the curriculum from Leslie.
Yep. Great.
It's important to recognize which question they're answering here. Learning collaboratives, coaching, conscious discipline strategies.
Yeah.
Coaching support and curriculum fidelity resources.
Yep. So a lot of professional development strategies, frameworks for practice, curriculum, and I'm glad to hear a lot about the coaching support and the learning collaborative.
Ooh, listen to this, Rebecca. Developing an in-house parent volunteer program.
Oh, yes.
Something about parent engagement being crucial.
Yes. Yeah, like I said, we need comprehensive solutions, right? We have to come at these issues from multiple angles. So next, I'm going to present a framework to help you think about, organize, and support your improvement efforts so that you get the results that you're hoping for in terms of improving the quality of teaching and child outcomes. So you just go to the next slide. So this framework is called the 5 Essential Supports. So let me tell you the story of where this framework came from. Going back to the mid-1990s, the University of Chicago Consortium on School Research began to see a large percentage of elementary schools improving, while other schools, often in very similar neighborhoods, were not. And they were curious. They wanted to find out what accounted for the differences in school performance and child outcomes. And they found that schools that were improving were strong in these 5 areas: effective instructional leadership as the driver of change, supporting, influence, guiding, and strengthening these other areas in the box, including collaborative teachers, engaged families, ambitious instruction, and supportive environments. All of that leading to those improved child outcomes in the end. Actually, can you click the next slide again? I think that arrow will pop up. Yep, there you go. There's child outcomes coming from that. So let me describe each of these a bit, and then I'll show you the data. So you can go to the next one. So effective instructional leaders focus strategically on children's learning. They nurture collective responsibility for improvement, and they provide clear instructional guidance. Collaborative teachers work together with their colleagues regularly to plan, problem solve, and support each other and to improve. We're going to talk more about those two in a bit. But engaged families are also important to partner with teachers to support children's learning at home and at school. Supportive environments are important so children feel safe, nurtured, liked. Staff hold high expectations for children and provide those individualized supports to help them meet those expectations. And then ambitious instruction, and I love that term. It's aligned to the instructional supports of the class. It's in pursuit of developing higher order thinking in children and not just rote learning of basic skills. So Michael, you just asked, can we see this chat message? I can. All right. So can you go to the...
Yeah, okay, sorry. Go ahead, keep going.
Okay, you can go to the next slide. So check this out. The University of Chicago researchers found that schools that were strong in the 5 essentials were 10 times more likely to improve children's learning than those that were weak. So here you can see the percentage of improving student test scores in reading and math. The more the essentials were strong, the greater gains that they saw. So now, just so you know too, the OUNCE is in the process of validating this framework for early childhood. And the study isn't complete yet, but so far it's looking like this framework will hold up. So you could go to the next slide. So the essentials are important in different ways, and their value is their combined strength. So the researchers found that engaged families related closely to better attendance, student engagement, and behavioral regulation. And that's important because children have to be present and engaged to benefit from quality teaching. They found that effective leadership and collaborative teachers related most closely to improvements in the quality of teaching. And then ambitious instruction and child-centered supportive environments were most closely related to children's reading and math achievement. So the important thing to know, though, is that all the schools were trying to improve, often with one initiative after the other. But what they found was that in schools that had a sustained weakness in even a single essential support, those improvement efforts were relegated to a less than 10% chance of success. So let that sink in for a minute. All of our improvement efforts, they aren't likely to change child outcomes if there's a sustained weakness in any of these 5 essential supports. Okay? So again, this comprehensive solution. So let me note too that even though it's harder to achieve strength on the essentials in more impoverished neighborhoods or areas, there are schools that are doing that. And this framework and the data can help leaders focus on the levers that drive instructional quality and equity in outcomes regardless of the racial, linguistic, or socioeconomic background of the school or the community. So there's hope here. So you can go to the next slide. So let's do a quick poll. Can you think about the 5 essentials in your organization? Which of these essential supports have you had the most success with in your school or center? Effective instructional leaders, collaborative teachers, engaged families, supportive environments, ambitious instruction. Give you a second to think about that.
Vote early, vote often. That's our slogan.
Yes.
Well, Chicago.
And that's, yeah, that is our motto. How's it looking?
Almost to 50% here. The first 50%, they get in. It's exciting.
All right, supportive environments in the lead. And that's not surprising, that right? That goes along with those high emotional supports in the class. Engaged families, effective leaders, good for you. That's great. And collaborative teachers, ambitious instruction, we have a little work to do. So, this and the research can tell us where we need to focus a little more of our efforts. So you can go to the next slide.
Oh, wait, 1 second here. I have to stop showing the poll. See, I'm doing that describing my own actions. I'm trying to raise my class score.
Yes. Yes. Self-talk. Self-talk. All right. So while all 5 essential supports are important to child outcomes, it's helpful to think about 2 of them as critical levers for improving the others. So I've spoken a little about strong leadership as the driver of implementation and improvement. The other is job-embedded professional learning is the vehicle for that improvement. And that's a new term. It includes the collaborative teachers, essential support I just talked about, teachers working together, learning together on the job to improve teaching and learning. How many of you are familiar with that term? I don't know if we want to do a poll or just raise hands.
Yeah, go ahead and raise your hand if you're familiar with that term.
Go to the next slide. Anybody familiar? The term that's more common in K-12, but it's becoming more common in early childhood, and the practice of it is definitely becoming more common. A lot of you talked about coaching, which would fall into the category of job-embedded professional learning. So you can go to the next slide. So let's watch a video now that I think will really help define and illustrate job-embedded professional learning. In this video, you'll hear from a few early childhood center leaders, Head Start leaders, describing how they changed professional development and improvement processes in their programs.
Well, before, in the past, it was really, going to workshops and then coming back and either like presenting like at a staff meeting or, sharing with a co-teacher and maybe making copies of the handouts and sharing with everybody, and hoping that you would maintain it and, like you came back with all these really great ideas. But if no one else seen like the benefit, it's kind of fizzled out and it wouldn't really go anywhere.
Professional development is a process. It's a continuous, ongoing process. It's not a one-time event that occurs and you expect practices to be improved. So not only can we send them to a training, we can then come alongside them and observe the practice and use the team of teachers from other classrooms to look at the work.
I think it has opened me as well because in the past I would just do observations in the room. I would just choose the time, go in, observe, and then just give feedback. Having the time to really reflect, really meet with them and collaborate, and to discuss back and forth helps me to really see how they think about teaching, how they process it. And it gives me a better understanding of how to support them. In the beginning, I wasn't sure how to support them because all I would look at was what I seen when I observed. But I never had taken the time to really discuss what it was that they needed from me. So oftentimes I find myself saying now, how can I support you? Instead of just giving them the information, is more back and forth. So what do you need from me to help you do this? And I think it helps my relationship with the teachers as well, with them knowing that I'm willing to listen to what they have to say, and I think it makes them open to what I have to say as well.
But what the lesson planning meeting has done is that sometimes they can get stuck. Or there's so many things thrown at them in early childhood, different standards, you know, there's NACE, you've got Head Start, you know, we have class assessments, there's ECHRs, there's all sorts of things. So how do they sort of make sure on a weekly basis that they're looking at children's data, they're looking at where their children are at, figuring out what can they do to help children get to the next level, having a conversation together as a team, you know.
So through the reflective practice group, through the coaching, looking at the observations, reviewing the data, then it helped us become more able to provide the kind of child caring practices we were hoping to achieve, the outcomes we wanted.
The next checkpoint I saw growth in literacy, and it was because we focused on it. And so I see that when you are saying, let's focus on instruction, let's focus on children's learning, that teachers are able to do it, and then you can see the outcome in children. And it was so immediate that it was gratifying.
So right now everyone's learning together, growing together. So the PD is much more effective than the traditional, I would say.
Okay, so I'm sorry, the video is a little slow on my end, but I hope you got the audio at least. So I was wondering, what did you hear these leaders say about the new ways they approach professional learning and development, or professional learning and improvement, compared to the old ways? If you could just write a few words in the chat box about the kinds of things that you heard.
Hold on 1 second here. Let me catch us up there.
That's okay.
Where were we? Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yes. There we go.
Come on. One more. There you go.
Yep.
So what did you hear about the new way they approach professional development compared to the old ways? These leaders had gone through a professional learning program for themselves to work on the 5 essentials and their own leadership in their program. What are you seeing there, Michael or Teresa?
Well, at the moment, I'm still waiting to see some responses. I think they may be, everyone may be writing.
Okay.
I did just see using in-house staff as trainers and mentors.
Yes, yes. In-house staff as trainers and mentors rather than sending teachers out.
Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah, in the beginning you heard Becky, one of the assistant directors, talking about how, you know, before teachers would go out to a training and they might come back and share the handouts, but if nobody else went, things kind of fizzled out. So using in-house staff, working together as teams. You heard one of the leaders talking about coming alongside teachers, using data, working together, planning intentionally.
We also have some other comments. Listening to the mentee is what they need. Working together. is more effective than large group instruction. Hey, that's
Yes.
true for adults and kids. Look at that.
Yes, 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 parallel process. Yeah, I love that when she talks about how she used to just go in and observe and give feedback. And it was sort of a one-way conversation, but now she's much better at asking open-ended questions and trying to understand the teacher's conceptions of teaching and what she needs to improve. So, okay. So let's put up that definition. So job-embedded professional development is grounded in day-to-day practice. It involves teams of professionals working together, not teachers in isolation. And it's really designed to enhance professional practice with the intent of improving child's learning and development. It's not just teachers enhancing their knowledge to get to compliance, but again, really enhancing practice to achieve positive outcomes. So in job-embedded professional learning opportunities, teachers are active in assessing and finding solutions to authentic and immediate problems of practice in their classroom, in their school or center, as part of a cycle of continuous improvement in teaching and learning. That sounds exciting, right? So guess what? Next slide. The new Head Start performance standards reflect the need for transforming professional development as well. The standards say a program must support the implementation of responsive care, effective teaching, and an organized learning environment through the integration of regular and ongoing supervision and a system of individualized and ongoing professional development. So what kinds of supervision and ongoing professional development? The standards talk about a system of evidence-based professional development, keywords like systemic, research-based, ongoing, process. It talks explicitly about training and coaching. So if you go to the next slide, there's a way to think about multiple strategies or multiple contexts for learning that your system should include. Slideshow, Zoom slideshow.
1 second. There we go.
So here you see 4 contexts for professional learning that really should be part of your professional development system. So teachers and leaders, by the way, need opportunities for knowledge development, and then also supports to transfer that knowledge to practice, and then opportunities to collaborate with peers, opportunities to reflect with their supervisors, to really support their learning and change in practice and continuous improvement over time. So I think there's a handout available for you about each of these. If not, we can send it after. So with the shift to job-embedded professional learning, training is not obsolete. Professionals still need opportunities for knowledge development. So workshops, courses, webinars, these are important to introduce an area of practice, you know, what it is, how to do it, why it's important. But there can be minimal expectation that people return and apply that knowledge to their daily work without any support. So those supports for transfer to practice are really needed, like coaching. Also mentoring or technical assistance, consultation. Those supports really help people apply what they've learned in training to their own unique classroom and their own unique situations. They can help people overcome obstacles and really develop their skills. So those supports are especially helpful for novice teachers, for those learning something new and complex like a new curriculum. Also, it's helpful for people that are struggling to improve and to meet quality standards. So I think of the coaching as a real, very important targeted support. And then the collaboration routines you can think of as a universal support for teachers' professional learning. So that's related to that essential support I was talking about earlier. They are really so powerful. If you could go to the next slide, Michael, and in the chat box, can people write, what do you think are the collaboration routines? Are there terms you've heard for teacher collaboration or peer learning before, or can you think of some examples of those? Anyone? Are you seeing any, Michael? Oh, you're on mute. I can't hear you.
Reflective practice groups.
Yeah.
New teacher cohorts.
Yeah.
Teacher learning communities. Mentoring.
Yeah.
Group reflection on video observation.
Yeah, those are great examples. So common terms for those professional learning communities, peer reflective practice groups, peer learning groups, learning networks, communities of practice. Those are all different terms for more or less the same thing. And then there are different formats for those as well, like study groups to learn from exemplar class videos, for example. There's data dialogues where teachers can get together to analyze children's data or to analyze teaching data like class scores together. There's also groups that examine documentation of children's learning or student work samples to better understand and assess development and to better plan for children. There's critical friends groups where teachers share successes and challenges and gain feedback from their peers, solve problems together. And then lesson study is another example that kind of combines all of those formats. So when these collaboration routines are done well, they can really be truly transformative. Teachers gain support from each other that carries outside of that meeting time into their everyday work. They gain new ideas, they challenge each other in good ways, and you know, overall it can just really have a big impact on the culture of the program and on individual teachers. Okay, so then that last, I was just going to say that last context, that supervision when it's reflective is also an important opportunity for professional learning. So to summarize, all of those together can really help advance teachers' knowledge, skills, and dispositions and support their learning and change in practice and continuous improvement over time. So all of that is made possible by effective instructional leaders. They are the key driver. So effective leaders set the vision for practice excellence. They maintain a strategic focus on children's learning and development in the face of all else. They enlist teachers in improvement efforts. You know, as I said, you know, you can bring them into the analysis of data, planning improvement strategies together. And by doing that, leaders build trust, shared understanding, and collective responsibility for improvement. Effective leaders protect time for teachers to work together, and they support and facilitate teachers learning on the job. And they maintain integrity and fairness and act ethically, confronting inequality and bias and ensuring equity. And they do all that while managing the business of running a program, including facilities, budget, human resources, all of that, but also, you know, maximizing that time that they spend supporting teaching and learning. So next. So how does that set of leader characteristics and behaviors lead to child outcomes? It's primarily by influencing educators' motivation to be effective and to continuously improve. You know, creating those conditions and those routines to build professional capacity and support effectiveness over time, and less by influencing teachers' knowledge and skills alone. And that may be different than what we thought before, even now with the emphasis on training and coaching. So, next slide. So what leaders need to do for teachers is the same as what teachers need to do for children. This is a quote from Andy Hargreaves, who's written a lot about teacher development. He said, "What we want for our children, we should want for their teachers. That schools be places of learning for both of them, and that such learning be suffused with excitement, engagement, passion, challenge, creativity, and joy." And that, you know, harkens back to the descriptions of effective teaching at the beginning, right? So we should want that for teachers too. It's a parallel process. Go to the next slide. So what does it sound like when that's happening? We have a quote from a teacher here who is describing what it's like now to be part of a strong professional learning community in her center and to have a strong instructional leader. She said, "I feel like it's empowering, you know, when it's not just from the top down, when it's right here and we believe in this stuff, and I have something to share, and it's valued by your administrator. Your colleagues also buy in and have that energy, and you have that love, and then you have an administrator that pushes you in that way and supports you and guides you and nudges you a bit farther. I think it's kind of what we try to do with our students too, now even when they're only 3. So I think she leads by example for sure. I'm wondering, you know, what stands out to you here? What's inspiring here? If you think about what she said from a class lens, you can see in there the emotional support that she gets. The leader has regard for her perspective, the peer connections, quality feedback she's getting, encouragement, affirmation, and scaffolding to do better. Anything stand out to people here?
Well, one thing, I go back to that quote from about that we want for teachers, what we want for kiddos. I mean, this is what we, if 4-year-olds were as articulate as this is what we want them to say about their teacher, right? They're challenging you, they're pushing you, they're guiding you, they're nudging you. That's what we want for a teacher. We do have some folks chiming in here. Empowering staff, that seems critical. Being seen and appreciated.
Yeah, that's really critical. Teachers are often on the receiving end of directives, and you know, there's so much compliance to worry about, that to really create that environment of collaboration is something to work towards. So I hope this webinar sparks some thinking about the different ways you are already and also could be advancing improvement in your program. Following this webinar, we'd like you to complete a survey. So you can think about it as an opportunity to reflect on your current leadership roles and responsibilities in light of what we've just talked about. Also the current opportunities for teachers to embedded professional learning and your own professional development needs. You can go to the next slide. And we'll use that information to inform the design of professional development opportunities and supports for leaders, including training, technical assistance and coaching, and peer learning. The information could also be used to inform policy change and advocacy efforts. This webinar was really just to introduce some ideas. So to design further supports for your learning, we really need to hear from you about where you're at with these ideas and practices and where you want to go. So you'll find a link to that survey in your email, and we're hoping you'll complete it by April 1st. So to close, I'm wondering what concepts or ideas from this webinar did you find most appealing? I'd really love to hear from you. You know, what was most intriguing or validating, interesting?
We'd love to see your responses, or if you are feeling inspired to talk, we can also unmute you if you're, raise your hand if you'd like that. Give a minute for people to respond. What concepts or ideas from this webinar did you find most appealing? The graphs, linking things together, the concept mapping, that's part of it. Yeah, super interesting. I can say just a little bit about the intentionality behind this is that we're at the ELD with the ounce, we're really trying to think about, okay, so we want higher kids' outcomes. That's a given. And we know that teacher-child interactions are the big leverage that we have around that. But that can seem pretty far away from directors and site managers' day-to-day job thinking. So this framework, I think, really helps us identify what's the job of each person at each level in the organization to improve instructional leadership. Ideas for collaborative learning between teachers. I'd like to know more about what others are doing.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, there's so many options there. Okay.
Donald, thank you. Framework of these concepts and how they fit into some other frameworks we have for professional development. Thank you, Leslie and Marcy. And Michelle speaks up and says the framework itself affirms what we are doing and affirms that our work is moving in the right direction. Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay.
Cindy says the webinar made me think about the relationship between leadership and the teaching staff. I think the framework will help us build more relationships. Well, that's great to hear, Cindy. That's the whole deal here.
Yeah. Great. So you can continue writing those in. Michael, I wonder if you wanted to do that last poll just about how interested are you in learning more about how to strengthen instructional leadership and how to strengthen the essential organizational supports for improvement in your program, from very interested to not very interested.
I have to say I missed that one.
Oh, sorry.
So
okay. So maybe
I
just raise your hand. Are you, if you're interested in learning more
yeah,
about?
Raise your hand. I see hands coming up. I see lots of hands raised.
Okay, good. Good.
Sorry
So
about that.
that's okay. So there's some upcoming opportunities to learn some more.
Yes.
You can go on.
So I'm going to talk about the 3 opportunities coming up, but I just wanted to give a twinkle to Rebecca for dedicating so much time and energy to put this together for us, and I just appreciate the work that's gone on to think these things through, to learn more about how programs can improve, and to prepare something that would be helpful and spark conversation and more thinking and more learning together about these important ideas. So thank you, Rebecca.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
What I'll do now is I'll flip over to here. It's taking me a second. Just a second. And there we go. I'll come back to those upcoming events in just a little bit, but I will say that I did want to share some equity resources, which we always do. So in that spirit, there's a new resource around strategies to support Latino kids' math skills. And in that resource, I'll just give you a sense of what that looks like. If I open it up here, there's a worksheet, there's a report, there's some nice graphics. Hey, look at that. These are things that line up nicely, don't they? Encourage parental involvement, empower children with the best training and methods. And there's some infographics that go with this. So that's a resource that will go out in the slides. Just share that with you. It'll be easier if I just keep this view. Also, I wanted to highlight this resource around STEM, providing high-quality STEM experiences for kiddos. There's a report here that also includes a lot of practical ideas. So as you're thinking about ways to encourage the development of mathematical thinking and curiosity and those other approaches to learning that we know are so important for kindergarten readiness, this resource could be helpful for you and your team in your program. I also wanted to highlight the Teacher Time webinar series. That's been rolling along all year. I've got the little calendar here, which I'll present to you a little bit better there. And these are put on by National Head Start for teachers, and each one is organized around important ideas about how teachers can support children's thinking and development. The one coming up tomorrow is quite conveniently around teacher-child interactions. They're just an hour. They're just for teachers. There's people talking, and there's video clips to really help people. And I know that for many of our programs, figuring out ways to do professional development kind of on the fly that doesn't involve getting everybody together or this is a great activity for a professional learning community to have a shared experience and then talk about it. And then speaking of that, with every Teacher Time webinar, the follow-up is what they call their coffee break. So that's where people can, who've done the webinar, can then come back in a week or two with questions, with comments, with challenges or success stories. So I really encourage programs to make those available. They're Fridays at noon. It's kind of a good time for a lot of programs. So throwing that out there, Teacher Time. So that brings us to our calendar. We've thought a lot about how we can help embed the development of these strategies to support high-quality teacher-child interactions that Rebecca's talking about. And so for each of the following events, we've got baked into these events possibilities for leadership and others to participate. So at the Specialist Conference, which is coming right up, there is a morning session on practice-based coaching that's already being led by folks from Region 10. So if you've got people in your organization that are taking leadership in that part of things, some of you wear multiple hats, and I recognize that, and then others, there's conversations within your organization about sort of who is leading coaching efforts at different parts of the organization. But that practice-based coaching is not for coaches. It's an overview of practice-based coaching for what Rebecca would call instructional leaders. So that's people in leadership who are coordinating and directing and providing leadership around coaching, but not necessarily doing the coaching themselves. So that's at the Specialist Conference coming up. And the last 15 minutes, I'm going to invite OPK-only staff to get together to talk more about how I can be more helpful to you as you are developing and implementing your systemic research-based coaching systems. I will remind folks that the spring conference of OAYC is coming up. If you've got people who are interested in attending, it's not too late to register for that. And then a little bit out of order, so I'll flip that around. At the Head Start Spring Conference, thanks to Donna and Tristan, we've worked hard to provide some activities that will follow up on this webinar today. There's a workshop in the morning with one of Rebecca's colleagues around these 5 essentials for directors and other instructional leaders. And then in the afternoon, there's going to be a workshop to really help you think about your coaching system for next year. So Rebecca talked about protecting time for teachers and coaches to meet together. So what does that look like? How's that going to work? How are you going to decide which teachers need intensive coaching support and which teachers are going to be clumped into professional learning communities? Because from the standards we know, and because of best practice, all teachers are going to be in professional learning communities. So you have the challenge of figuring out which teachers are going to get intensive coaching and which are going to be in other kinds of coaching situations. There's mentor coaching, there's peer coaching, group coaching. Okay. And then we also have a workshop, a course actually, for coaches, especially the OPK-only coaches, although other people are invited, at the annual Early Childhood Summer Institute. It's in Albany, which is really convenient if you want to go to Tangent, because Albany is just across the railroad tracks from Tangent. And that course is going to be awesome. It's going to be a day and a half on practice-based coaching, a half day on Coaching Companion, which is the free online tool to help coaches and teachers work together using video and lots of quality feedback. And then also a day on using the class tool to support coaching efforts. So that's at the Summer Institute in Albany in late June. And that concludes our March OPK Directors webinar. I sure want to thank people for participating. If you have questions that you want to get answered before we go, then feel free to write those in now. We will make the recordings and some version of Rebecca's slides available. I know we've gotten some questions about what happened to previous months of slides and things. We've had some technical difficulties with the recordings that we've got IT working on. So as soon as that happens, we'll get a big dump of good materials for you Yes, Michelle, I don't know why it said 2016. That's a good comment. It should be 2017, so ignore that. Yes, it is late June 2017. Thank you, Michelle. Other questions or comments? Otherwise, I wish you well in your work, and feel free to let us know if you would like to chat more about this. On my email signature, there is a blue button for booking me, so if you want to book a phone conversation, just click on that and it'll open up my schedule and we can schedule something pretty easily. With that, I want to thank my colleagues Teresa and Rebecca for helping so much with this webinar, and also Dawn was on the line in case I fumbled, and Shauna earlier was here, so thank you all. And otherwise, I will see you all in a month and a little bit before that at Eagle Crest. Talk to you soon. Thank you.